The Krusty Krab has been through quite a bit of destruction throughout the SpongeBob series. The character who is most affected by the destruction of Bikini Bottom's premier eatery is its owner, Mr. Krab. But does this crustaceous cheapskate deserve all of this destruction of property? Let's take a look at every Krusty Krab destruction and rank them from least deserved to most deserved. The rules. So before we get into the ranking, I want to talk a little bit about what I mean when I say if Mr. Krabs does or does not deserve to have his restaurant destroyed. Now, when I say the word deserve, I am not saying that I personally agree with the karmic justice of destroying a man's property for his misdeeds. What I am actually talking about is a concept I like to call narratively deserving, which looks at the consequences a character faces from the lens of what the story is trying to say. Basically, if Mr. Krabs does something and it leads to the Krusty Krab getting destroyed, then the narrative is making a statement about the action that led to the Krusty Krab's destruction, and is using that consequence as a way to communicate the message of the story. Also, I am only talking about times where the loss of the Krusty Krab is a serious plot point in an episode that renders the Krusty Krab effectively non-operational or no longer in possession of Eugene Krab. For example, I won't be including something like Texas on this list, because the damage to the Krusty Krab is not treated as something with lasting consequence. And I also won't be including something like dying for pie, because even though the pie blows a hole in the back wall, business continues as usual. Dream sequences and minor damages don't count either. Without further ado, let's get into the list. Number 31, Suds. So while the Krusty Krab's destruction in Suds is not the most severe damage to the restaurant, I do think it is the most narratively undeserved from Mr. Krabs' perspective. I think this because Mr. Krabs actually did the right thing in the episode by sending SpongeBob home from work after finding out he was sick, an action that feels almost out of character by even Season 2 standards. However, just because Mr. Krabs didn't deserve the destruction of the Krusty Krab in this episode doesn't mean that the plot point wasn't well written. Mr. Krabs himself is not a major character in Suds, and his only purpose in the narrative is to send SpongeBob home for being sick and react to the Krusty Krab being destroyed once SpongeBob's out-of-control Suds blow the place up. Suds revolves around the ideological conflict between Patrick and Sandy, who each hold opposing views about whether or not SpongeBob should go to the doctor to treat his Suds, with Sandy being pro and Patrick being anti-doctor. The narrative sides with Sandy, and through the consequences of Patrick's alternative treatments, we see SpongeBob's condition worsen and worsen until he becomes a giant ball filled with bubbles that ends up destroying the Krusty Krab. By having SpongeBob's untreated Suds destroy the Krusty Krab, the episode further communicates the lesson that bad things will happen if you don't go to the doctor, and uses the clear and easy to understand image of the destroyed Krusty Krab to hammer that point home. Too bad poor old Mr. Krabs had to get caught in the crossfire. Honorable mention, Just One Bite. I don't know if I would consider Just One Bite to be a Krusty Krab destruction, because we do not actually see the destroyed Krusty Krab in the episode. All we see is an explosion after all the Krabby Patties go right to Squidward's thighs.
And then you blow up.
The best evidence for this being an authentic Krusty Krab destruction is the fact that it shows the outside of the restaurant, but I'm still not fully convinced this explosion took out the restaurant. Let me know what you think in the comments. Narratively, this explosion is not a consequence to Mr. Krabs because, well, Mr. Krabs isn't even in this episode. The only reason Suds would be less deserved is because in Suds, Mr. Krabs actually does something nice, and nice is more good than neutral. Oh yeah, fun fact, Suds is the only episode on this list where Mr. Krabs does something nice. It's pretty much neutral or evil from here on out. The explosion itself is a consequence to Squidward and communicates the episode's two main lessons: that it's okay to admit when you were wrong, as Squidward refuses to admit that he likes Krabby Patties throughout the episode, and that when you enjoy something, you should enjoy it in moderation. While these are great lessons, since Mr. Krabs did not have either of these flaws, he is not the one deserving of this explosion, if it actually even destroyed the Krusty Krab. Number 30. That Sinking Feeling. That Sinking Feeling is the only official episode on this list where Mr. Krabs does not make an appearance. So, since he didn't do anything at all, he does not narratively deserve his restaurant getting sucked underground. The narrative of That Sinking Feeling criticizes the behavior of both Squidward and SpongeBob and Patrick, showing both groups to be in the wrong in different ways, with Squidward being too strict about where SpongeBob and Patrick are allowed to play, and SpongeBob and Patrick being too reckless in their creation of tunnels as an act of malicious compliance defense against Squidward's rule of not being allowed to cross his property. The destruction of the Krusty Krab happens within a larger sequence that leads to the destruction of the entirety of Bikini Bottom, leading all of the citizens to now have to embrace an underground life. While Squidward seems to be more mad about the punishment, the destruction of the entire city communicates the errors of all three involved characters. But since none of those characters are Mr. Krabs, this episode sits firmly towards the bottom of the list. Numbers 29 through 26. The ones where Krabs is an innocent victim of Plankton's schemes. So there are 4 episodes where I would consider Krabs to be an innocent victim of Plankton's schemes that end up destroying the Krusty Krab. They are Bucket Sweet Bucket, Married to Money, Dome Alone, and Making Waves. There are other times where Plankton-related shenanigans destroy the restaurant, but these 4 episodes are the ones where Krabs himself does not do any action that the narrative is commenting on, and instead uses what happens to the Krusty Krab for other elements of the story. Bucket Sweet Bucket sees the Krusty Krab destroyed because Plankton tricked SpongeBob and Patrick into renovating the Chum Bucket, which causes them to take apart the Krusty Krab and put it back together on top of the Chum Bucket. I suppose it's debatable if this is even a Krusty Krab destruction. It's kind of a restaurant of Theseus at this point, but I will consider it a part of the list, because at the very least, it being on the opposite side of the street would put it firmly out of Mr. Krabs' possession. While the loss of his restaurant is undeserved, this episode is the least consequential to Mr. Krabs, because not only is he able to immediately move his restaurant back to his own land using sweet cartoon logic, but he actually benefits from this episode because Squidward took apart the Chum Bucket and improved the Krusty Krab's interior design, allowing him to jack up the price of a Krabby Patty. Married to Money begins with the Krusty Krab already being destroyed by some kind of Plankton sea bear related plan. Side note, I was a little disappointed that they sanitized the sea bear so much in this opening. Like, in the camping episode, the sea bear was not only borderline mythical, but also had one really specific rule to keep it from attacking you: the sea bear circle. So to have SpongeBob at the beginning of this episode be like, I'm gonna be all cuddly with the sea bears, when he was so terrified of them before, just shows that this is nothing more than a cheap reference. Anyway, modern SpongeBob being bad at making references aside, since Mr. Krabs doesn't do anything that warrants this sea bear attack, he is completely narratively undeserving of it. Oh yeah, also this is the episode where Mr. Krabs marries a stack of money that's actually Plankton in disguise. That's not relevant to the overall subject, but probably should mention that. Pretty alright episode, actually. Dome Alone is an episode where Sandy breaks her helmet and gets stuck in her dome for a few weeks and tries to communicate with the outside world to fight boredom. She finds herself getting obsessed with what she thinks is a Plankton scheme to destroy the Krusty Krab, but it was actually just an innocent scheme to put up a billboard. Because of her paranoia and boredom, she fires a laser beam into the billboard, which causes it to fall over onto the Krusty Krab. While this consequence is fitting for Sandy's story, the very thing she tried to protect she ended up destroying, since Mr. Krabs didn't do anything other than count some money, he was not narratively deserving. Making Waves has Plankton blow up the Krusty Krab in literally the first 5 seconds of the episode. Almost a self-parody of all the times the restaurant blows up throughout the show. This destruction serves as the inciting incident of the episode, as it encourages Krabs to go on vacation to get away from Plankton to find that, surprise, surprise, he's bunking with Plankton. Classic trope. While Krabs doesn't narratively deserve his now destroyed restaurant, the incident does challenge him as a character to question how he deals with Plankton and leads to a pretty interesting narrative. So, because Krabs is an innocent victim of Plankton, all 4 of these episodes are grouped together equally, with none of them having Krabs considered more or less narratively deserving of the destruction. The only reason it's slightly higher than the earliest entries is that you could maybe consider the entire Plankton/Krabs rivalry in some way Krabs' fault if you consider friend or foe to be the canon backstory, which, if you've seen my secret formula video, you would know is the one I prefer the most. Number 25. Sponge-Cano. In Sponge-Cano, the Krusty Krab is destroyed by a volcanic eruption. Since this is a natural disaster and Mr. Krabs didn't do anything before the volcano erupted, I hesitate to say this is in any way narratively deserved. Mr. Krabs does mock the patrons for panicking, stating, "It's just a little lava," right before the lava destroys the cash register, making Krabs join in on the panic. But that narrative punishment more so revolves around destroying the cash register, not the entire Krusty Krab. The destruction of the Krusty Krab is not much more than a byproduct of the bigger conflict of the episode, the erupting volcano, which the citizens believe will be stopped if they sacrifice the most miserable person in town, which challenges Squidward to confront his own cynicism. I actually was surprised at how good of an episode SpongeKano is, especially because the series of episodes like the Legends of Bikini Bottom I remember really not liking when I watched them as a kid. But SpongeKano actually has a really deep narrative about living each day as your last and mob mentality in a crisis by using the natural disaster to tell that story. Number 24. Slide Whistle Stooges. In Slide Whistle Stooges, the Krusty Krab is destroyed when Squidward drives a gas truck through the restaurant because he gets too obsessed with a slide whistle. The lesson of the episode is to not get too wrapped up with a certain thing to the point where you annoy people and wreak havoc. It honestly isn't communicated super well, considering that SpongeBob and Patrick were definitely crossing a line with how much they slide whistled Squidward at the beginning of the episode. Like, sure, Squidward's actions are worse later on when he gets into slide whistling, but I don't think the narrative did a good job of contrasting SpongeBob and Patrick as being in the right and Squidward being in the wrong, even though that is what the narrative clearly wanted to do. I mentioned Cave-Dwelling Sponge earlier, which is an episode that was much better at finding this balance and portrayed both groups in clearer shades of gray. While the destruction of the Krusty Krab is simply one piece of destruction in a broader montage of destruction meant to show that Squidward is taking things too far, there is one small moment that does make Mr. Krabs slightly more narratively deserving of the destruction than earlier entries. See, the truck destroys the chum bucket first, and Mr. Krabs laughs at Plankton before his restaurant gets plowed through next, teaching a micro lesson about not laughing at others' misfortune as it could just as easily happen to you. It's kind of funny how the situation is actually the complete opposite of Cave-Dwelling Sponge, since in that episode the Krusty Krab gets destroyed first and Plankton gloats before his restaurant gets sunk. A lot of parallels between these two episodes. Number 23. Delivery to Monster Island. In Delivery to Monster Island, the Krusty Krab is eaten by a monster that was led to Bikini Bottom by SpongeBob and Plankton, who had been stuck on a monster-infested deserted island after a Krusty Krab delivery/secret formula theft attempt gone wrong. It's a pretty clever episode with a lot of great monster designs, but it could have used a little more time in the oven writing-wise to really tie together the story. As far as what Krabs narratively deserves, this episode would have been lower on the list if not for the moment when SpongeBob gets back to the Krusty Krab, where Mr. Krabs reprimands him for being late for 6 years rather than showing concern for where he's been, comically revealing that SpongeBob and Plankton were stuck on the island for 6 years. Mr. Krabs is then immediately punished for his lack of concern for his friend and employee by having his restaurant gobbled down by a monster. Number 22. The Goob Father. The Goob Father is an episode that revolves around the Krusty Krab getting threatened by goofy goobers when they start selling ice cream, since the Goob Father doesn't want them encroaching on his ice cream selling territory. The episode itself doesn't have too much to say narratively, it's just like a bunch of mafia bits. Like, okay, we get it. Goob Father sounds like the Godfather. You're very clever. The episode would have been stronger narratively, and the destruction of the Krusty Krab would have been more deserved if the whole episode treated ice cream like it was some criminal act. Because as the episode stands, Krabs selling ice cream was pretty innocent. The episode kind of makes me think of Breaking Bad a bit, you know, the stay out of my territory, and all the conflicts in that show involving the territories of criminal organizations. But the reason Breaking Bad works and this SpongeBob episode doesn't, yes, I'm comparing the two, is because in Breaking Bad, the protagonist is also committing a criminal act, so the territorial dispute has a stronger sense of gray morality. The Goob Father makes a strenuous connection between ice cream and illicit goods, but because it doesn't lean into that enough, the narrative falls flat. Number 21. Spongehenge. Spongehenge is another natural disaster plotline, similar to SpongeKano. What makes Mr. Krabs a little more narratively deserving of this Krusty Krab destruction is how little he cares for SpongeBob throughout the episode. The strong winds are making life difficult in Bikini Bottom, but are especially hard on SpongeBob, because his holes make music that attracts jellyfish. Mr. Krabs is only concerned with his bottom line and drags SpongeBob to work on a fishing line and doesn't try to help, he doesn't show empathy, and shows an all-around bad attitude in the face of this disastrous act of Neptune. Or Poseidon, depending on who you ask. At the end of the episode, the Krusty Krab is seen buried in the sand after SpongeBob creates Spongehenge, communicating to SpongeBob and the audience that life in Bikini Bottom is essentially no more. A bit of a harsh punishment considering this is the most permanent Krusty Krab destruction in the entire show, but due to Krabs' actions, definitely at least a little bit narratively deserved. Number 20. Mermaid Pants. Mermaid Pants is an episode that revolves around SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs role-playing as Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy characters. Krabs gets a little too into it, and in the resulting hijinks, the Krusty Krab gets destroyed. It's a simple story for kids about not taking games too far, and the destruction of the Krusty Krab is a way of communicating that. Number 19, Pat No Pay. Pat No Pay is a short episode that revolves around Patrick ordering a bunch of Krabby Patties and then not paying for them. So Mr. Krabs has him work off his debt, leading to a bunch of Patrick-related shenanigans that eventually destroy the Krusty Krab. While Mr. Krabs was in the right both morally and legally to demand restitution from Patrick, the narrative does make a statement about how sometimes when you're dealing with unreasonable people, it can do more harm than good to try and get even with them, and usually the best course of action is to either demand payment up front if you're going to help them, or let them go on owing you so that they avoid you and you never have to deal with them again. Obviously, Patrick is also in the wrong for not paying for his food, but the narrative does a great job of illustrating how whether you're in Patrick's or Mr. Krabs' position, there are actions you can take to avoid negative outcomes. Number 18, The Krusty Plate. The Krusty Plate is another short episode. Funny how both Pat No Pay and Krusty Plate are Krusty Krab Destruction short episodes from Season 5. Weird coincidence. The Krusty Plate is a unique entry on this list because it's the only episode in the series that shows the Krusty Krab getting destroyed twice, once in a flashback and once in the present. I almost had this be two separate entries, but decided to just cover episodes only, rather than individual incidents. The character flaw that is criticized in The Krusty Plate is that of perfectionism. Mr. Krabs demands that all plates be spotless before SpongeBob can leave work, even though there is one stain that just won't come out. While SpongeBob also takes his own sense of perfectionism too far, which leads to the destruction of the Krusty Krab, Mr. Krabs is the one who demanded the stain be removed, so he is more at fault. Mr. Krabs was also aware at how SpongeBob is when left alone, as shown by the flashback to the restaurant on fire, and decided to ignore his better judgment over something as small as a stain, leading to his narratively deserved loss of livelihood. Numbers 17 through 14. The ones where Krabs tries too hard to make more money. So this is another little section of episodes that I consider equally narratively deserving because they all have Mr. Krabs try to bolster business at the Krusty Krab, which backfires. The episodes in this section are The Good Krabby Name, The Krabby Patty That Ate Bikini Bottom, Krabby Patty Creature Feature, and Hot Crossed Nuts. In The Good Krabby Name, Mr. Krabs is obsessed with making sure everyone in Bikini Bottom eats at the Krusty Krab, so he engages in an aggressive advertising campaign that angers the citizens of the town so much that they destroy the restaurant. But Krabs doesn't care because he finally got his final customer. In The Krabby Patty That Ate Bikini Bottom, Mr. Krabs uses a growth serum on a Krabby Patty that makes it grow too big and consumes the entire town, Krusty Krab included. In Krabby Patty Creature Feature, Mr. Krabs has Sandy create some kind of new Krabby Patty that turns everyone into patty zombies that destroy the Krusty Krab. Hot Cross Nuts is an episode where the Krusty Krab starts selling like roasted nuts or whatever. It's one of those cartoon episodes where there's like that thing that everyone really likes and it causes problems. The nuts are so good that the Krusty Krab customers eat the Krusty Krab because it tastes like the nuts. The reason these Krusty Krab destructions are narratively deserved is because they teach the episode's respective lessons about not taking shortcuts or engaging in get-rich-quick schemes, and uses the business of the Krusty Krab and its subsequent destruction to convey that narrative. Number 13, Drive-Thru. Drive-Thru is also an episode where Krabs tries too hard to make more money, but I wanted to put it higher on the list than the episodes in the previous section because of the sheer amount of times Krabs gives in to his greed in this episode. The episode takes place in an alternate reality where the side walls of the Krusty Krab are wooden instead of glass, and Krabs uses a hole in the wall to make a Krusty Krab drive-thru. The central lesson of the episode revolves around the concept of, if you don't pay a little bit now, you'll pay a lot later. Krabs refuses to get a proper mic system, refuses to restructure the restaurant, and all around keeps making bad decisions until he just loses it and destroys the Krusty Krab by his own hand trying to create more drive-thrus. Number 12. Selling Out. Selling Out revolves around Mr. Krabs selling the Krusty Krab due to how much money he is offered for it, and going through a character arc where he learns that running his business is more important than all the money in the world. Both Mr. Krabs selling the Krusty Krab and the Krabby Mondays getting destroyed are narratively deserved by Mr. Krabs, because they are both the result of decisions Mr. Krabs made. While it was framed positively by the narrative that Mr. Krabs destroyed Krabby Mondays because they served these synthetic gray goo patties made by machine, boy did this episode age well, the Krusty Krusty Krab being sold and subsequently destroyed is still representative of Mr. Krabs' greed, and his hope in rebuilding the restaurant to its original glory at the end symbolizes his redemption. Number 11. Patty Hype. I almost didn't include Patty Hype on this list because, well, the Krusty Krab doesn't get destroyed in this episode, but Mr. Krabs does lose the Krusty Krab, so I feel like it counts. Patty Hype is an episode about how to properly deal with new ideas, with Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob representing opposite extremes. Mr. Krabs outright rejects SpongeBob's idea of pretty patties, calling it silly, while SpongeBob goes ahead with pretty patties perhaps a little too quickly without understanding its side effects. When Mr. Krabs sees how much money pretty patties are bringing in, he shifts his perspective from one extreme to the other, completely embracing the new idea to the point where he trades the Krusty Krab to SpongeBob in exchange for the Pretty Patties IP, which leads to him facing the consequences of the untested new product causing problems among its customers. The reason that this is narratively deserved is because it teaches the lesson to both be accepting of new ideas, but also be cautious of them. Because Mr. Krabs goes from one bad extreme to the other, he faces the consequences of losing his restaurant and facing an angry mob. Number 10. Spy Buddies. So Spy Buddies was going to be placed much higher on this list if it weren't for the twist of the episode. Until the last minute of its runtime, the episode has you believe that Mr. Krabs put SpongeBob and Patrick up to spying on Plankton for no other reason than he's just paranoid. Had that been the actual situation, this episode would have gone a few notches up. However, the twist of the episode is that Mr. Krabs and Plankton actually switched places because they made a bet to see if Krabs could steal his own secret formula, which Krabs won. Since the destruction of the Krusty Krab is nothing more than a wager, it isn't as morally wrong from Krabs' perspective. After all, he basically destroyed his own restaurant. But that doesn't mean it's not deserved at all, because if you make a bet, you do have to be willing to face the consequences of what that bet entails. So that places Spy Buddies right here in the sense of not too deserved, but not completely undeserved. Number 9. Employee of the Month. Employee of the Month is a turning point on this list because before this entry, every episode I covered either had Mr. Krabs not deserve the destruction at all, make a personal mistake, or just be kind of a jerk. But from here on out, all of the entries are actual deep moral failings that hurt other people. In Employee of the Month, the Krusty Krab is destroyed because SpongeBob and Squidward compete too hard for the Employee of the Month award. So you might be asking, why is this so high up? Isn't it SpongeBob and Squidward's fault? What is the deep moral failing that I'm accusing Mr. Krabs of committing here? Well, I'll let Squidward explain it.
Mr. Krabs gives you that award so you'll work harder for no extra money.
So the story criticizes 3 character flaws and uses the destruction of the Krusty Krab to criticize those flaws. SpongeBob, being the incumbent employee of the month, feels entitled to the award. Squidward, even though he is aware of the business strategy, lets his own personal feelings get the better of him and competes for the title not because he wants it, but just so SpongeBob can't have it. And Mr. Krabs pitted them against each other just so he could get a little bit more sweet productivity. While I definitely think the narrative is communicating Krabs' manipulative tendencies as a moral failing on Krabs' part, it definitely is the most mild of all of Mr. Krabs' actions that hurt others, and thus why it is where it is on the list. Number 8. Frozen Face-Off. Frozen Face-Off revolves around some of the characters competing in a sled dog-esque race, which leads to a bunch of them getting stuck in the wilderness. Mr. Krabs abandons his friends in order to try and get back to Bikini Bottom and win the grand prize of $1 million. The way the Krusty Krab gets destroyed is because while everyone is distracted with the snow-themed race with the fake grand prize, Plankton is trying to get into the safe that contains the secret formula and attempts to dismantle it
Atom by atom! Uh-oh.
Gotta say, this is the funniest Krusty Krab destruction of them all, which is interesting because I don't really like this episode all that much. It starts off with an extremely cliche, wacky races premise, and then it kind of devolves into this wilderness survival plot where they have to escape from this 3D animated Kraken monster that looks great, but it's just another monster that chases them with no deeper engagement with the story. You got no character arcs, no themes, maybe a little bit of a lesson with the Krabs thing, but even that doesn't really deeply connect with the destruction of the Krusty Krab. Regardless of its writing flaws, the Krusty Krab does get destroyed and Mr. Krabs does do something wrong, so for those reasons, it ends up on this spot on the list. Number 7. 5-Star Restaurant. Here we have our only episode of the Patrick Star Show on the list. 5-Star Restaurant has all of the Patrick family members working at the Krusty Krab, which leads to it getting destroyed, it getting put back together, and Squidward getting hired. The reason this episode is so high on the list is because the very reason that Patrick starts working at the Krusty Krab is because Mr. Krabs realizes he is too dumb to realize that you're supposed to get paid for working a job. So Mr. Krabs basically enslaves him. With that in mind, the restaurant getting destroyed is pretty narratively deserved. Number 6. Ghoul Fools. Ghoul Fools is an episode that revolves around SpongeBob and Patrick dealing with some ghost ship guy. The episode is such a mess. It doesn't really have any deep themes or anything. It just kind of has a bunch of vague ghost things happen. One of the plot points of this episode is that SpongeBob and Patrick have to go buy a part for the ghost ship in order to save their souls. So the ghost guy gives them a doubloon to go pick it up, but Mr. Krabs then finds out that this ghost has a bunch of doubloons, so he tries to steal the doubloons. The action that Mr. Krabs does that the narrative is criticizing is just theft. Because of this attempted theft of the gold doubloons, the Flying Dutchman, who was the original owner of the doubloons, nukes all of Bikini Bottom as punishment. Now, after the nuke goes off, we do see the Krusty Krab intact in the void, so I suppose whether or not the Krusty Krab was destroyed depends on your interpretation of the afterlife, but it's enough for me to count it. Number 5. There Will Be Grease. There Will Be Grease revolves around Mr. Krabs and Plankton being forced to work together after they discover a pile of grease between their properties that contains runoff from both of their restaurants. The duo then become basically snake oil salesmen and market the grease as something useful when it actually isn't. Hijinks ensue and the Krusty Krab goes bye-bye. The Chum Bucket too, but this video's not about the Chum Bucket destructions. Maybe that'll be a video somewhere in the future. Don't forget to subscribe. So the reason this is deserved is obvious. Scamming people is wrong, so by having the scammers face these consequences, it communicates how wrong this is, and also communicates that you as a consumer should avoid buying from people like them. Number 4. Squid on Strike. Squid on Strike has to be the most iconic Krusty Krab destruction of the entire series.
I will dismantle this oppressive establishment board by board.
The episode deals with the concept of strikes and workers' rights, which has earned this episode quite a reputation. While the episode does do a good job at showing how the proletarian SpongeBob and Squidward are taken advantage of by bourgeois Mr. Krabs in a way that even a kid can understand it, I do want to point out the human element of the episode as well. The episode doesn't only point out the power imbalance within the system, but also honestly communicates how to best deal with such power imbalances. Of the two striking Krusty Krab workers, it is Squidward who is more aware of the actual nuances of going on strike and negotiating, whereas SpongeBob, let's just say, hasn't read much theory. But even though Squidward is the more informed of the two strikers, it is Squidward's radicalizing speech where he describes metaphorically what should be done
We'll saw the foundation of big business in half.
that later inspires SpongeBob to take more literal action.
I will saw the tables of tyranny in half.
When SpongeBob destroys the Krusty Krab, it undermines the negotiations Squidward was making with Mr. Krabs, teaching the lesson to not be too rash in such situations. While the narrative teaches exercising caution, it does still do a good job of criticizing power, which is why I do still see Mr. Krabs as being narratively deserving of having the Krusty Krab destroyed, even though SpongeBob did it. After all, if Mr. Krabs didn't create the conditions where his worker felt no choice but to take such action, it wouldn't have happened in the first place. Now remember, I am only speaking in terms of fictional narratives. Would I think that this would still be true in real life?
The law requires that I answer no.
Number 3. Skill Crane. Skill Crane revolves around Mr. Krabs installing a claw machine in the Krusty Krab and shows Squidward develop a gambling addiction. The main arc of the episode revolves around Squidward dealing with this addiction, eventually winning and then not quitting once he does win, leading to him thinking he can control a real industrial crane that then destroys the Krusty Krab. While the destruction of the Krusty Krab is framed as Squidward's consequence for not overcoming his addiction, I do think it's fitting that the Krusty Krab itself is destroyed due to Krabs being the one to install the claw machine in the first place. After all, even though Squidward is responsible for his own actions, people who knowingly profit off of those with gambling or other addictions are truly the lowest of the low, a social problem that is getting much worse in the real world. So with that in mind, it is definitely narratively deserved for Mr. Krabs to get his business destroyed for having used his business to profit in such a morally corrupt way. Number 2. Lighthouse Louie. In Lighthouse Louie, Mrs. Puff tricks SpongeBob into cleaning out her lighthouse so that she doesn't have to deal with him for a little while. Hijinks ensue and SpongeBob tries to deal with a stray snail he found in the lighthouse, which leads to the lighthouse rolling all throughout town, causing havoc. Just before the lighthouse strikes the Krusty Krab, Mr. Krabs demands his customers go outside and shield the restaurant with their bodies, putting their well-being below the well-being of his property. That's pretty messed up, and the narrative understands that, so it punishes Krabs with the destruction of his restaurant, and it also squishes him too. The reason this entry is so high is that one of the worst things a person can do is disregard the life and safety of another. So because the moment so blatantly does this, even if it's just for a quick little laugh, it places it right here at the number 2 spot. Number 1. Out of the picture. So what could possibly be number 1, huh? On this list, we have such heinous actions as contempt for others' safety, betrayal of friends, violations of workers' rights. What could be worse than all that? Attempted murder? So the plot of Out of the Picture revolves around Mr. Krabs trying to kill Squidward because he bought a bunch of his art and thinks it will go up in value once he's out of the picture. Kind of a funny play on words. At first, Krabs tries to have Squidward whacked by sending him on particularly dangerous delivery jobs, but once that doesn't work, he just kind of tries to do it with his bare hands. Mean-spiritedness aside, I really can't help but enjoy this episode. The motivation for Krabs is just absurd enough, but also believable enough for me to buy the story, and the narrative also deeply engages with Squidward's insecurity as an artist. I really feel for Squidward when Krabs buys his art and he feels so hopeful about it, and I really feel for him at the moment where he realizes he has to destroy his paintings in order to save his life. As if Krabs' actions weren't enough to warrant the number 1 spot, he even ends up destroying the Krusty Krab by his own hand at the end with the help of Squidward, as they think destroying the restaurant is some kind of newfangled performance art. Overall, the destruction of the Krusty Krab is a commentary on the absurdity of the value of art and the lengths that some will go in order to inflate that value, and is by far the most narratively deserved time Mr. Krabs loses his beloved Krusty Krab.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you like what I'm doing here, please consider supporting my Patreon or becoming a channel member. Also, check out my gaming channel, where I just put out a video about Battle for Bikini Bottom GBA. Man, that game is a disaster.